Chew is a forged-in-the-dark tabletop RPG published by Imagining Games, developed by Peter Petruccia and based on the Eisner Award-winning comic book series of the same name by John Layman and Rob Guillory. I think in order to understand this RPG, we first have to take a look at that comic series. Chew is a comic whose original run went for 60 issues and told the story of FDA agent Tony Chew, who had the supernatural ability to receive psychic impressions from anything that he ate. This was an important power to have because in this world, a bird flu has killed 23 million Americans and led to the banning of all chicken and other bird meat. So Agent Chew's job is to hunt down illegal meat buying, selling, and consumption. I think the most important thing to know about the comic, without spending 30 minutes explaining all the hilarious examples, is the fact that it's a sort of hyper-violent gonzo fantasy world. For example, in the second major story arc, Agent Chew discovers that a plant that tastes like chicken actually comes from outer space. In another arc, the villain changes frog DNA to make them taste more like chickens, calling them frickins. I don't want to spoil all the plot lines, but let's just say there is a lot of Agent Chew and other characters eating human body parts in order to gain important information, and there are vampires and egg-worshipping cults and other stuff. The point is, Chew turns out to be very fertile grounds for the kind of emergent storytelling and the freedom that really only tabletop RPGs can bring. And as it turned out, the rights to use the setting and the artwork could not have gone to a better team. In this video, I first want to show you the physical version of this game, just what it all looks like and the general quality of it. Then I want to walk you through a chunk of the core rules. I can't actually walk you through the 2 books that comprise the game because they total about 850 pages of content, but I want you to come away with an idea of how this game works. And finally, I want to share with you my personal pros and cons about this game after an initial reading of it. The deluxe slipcase version of this game runs about 7 inches wide by 11 inches tall and 2.5 inches thick. It weighs a little over 5.5 pounds. I think the first thing you'll notice about this game, and it's a feature that is absolutely relentless throughout all of the materials, is the fact that it is all incredibly and lavishly illustrated. You'd think that this comes with the territory of adopting a comic series where you can just sort of borrow art from the comics and plaster your game with it, but I think it's easier said than done. Juggling and arranging literally thousands of illustrations across 850 pages of layout in a way that looks good and is readable is probably beyond the capability of most designers out there. You'll see what I mean throughout this video. The 2 books in the slipcase have grayscale covers, but they're actually both treated with a rainbow holographic sheen that diffracts the light as it hits. One book is the core rules with a bunch of GM guidance, and the other is a setting book. Both books are stitch bound, which is important with a book of this many pages. Insane artwork for the end paper. Both books feel like this, an embarrassment of riches in terms of illustrations, way more than a normal RPG project could ever afford or even want to include. I think what's interesting about this style of layout, and sorry for continuing to harp on about layout here, we'll get to the rules in a minute, but this layout is the kind I wish the Mork Borg spin-offs were doing more. Instead of maximum skater mag insanity with completely unrestrained use of fonts and sizes and positioning, to actually show some restraint so that readability and usability of the book remains paramount. Notice from page to page how we have plenty of art and plenty of dynamic text placement and shaping, but it never goes off the deep end into reckless illegibility territory. I think the reason we don't see more of this kind of creative layout and more of this kind of layout in the indie RPG space is frankly because this is easier to do. Restraint is harder. But okay, that's my rant on that. As you can see at a glance here, this is a staggering 460 pages of vibrantly illustrated work. And the setting book is another 390 pages containing areas, cases to solve, basically enough content to play this game for dozens of sessions. There's a booklet of character playbooks. It feels like 80 or 100 pages or so. They're printed double-sided, and what you're getting is one rules cheat sheet and then each of the 8 character archetypes printed on both sides of a single sheet. Ironically, I've been singing the praises of the layout of this game, but I do think these character sheets went a little too far on the zany layout. It's not a showstopper or anything, but the lush layout elements forces some of the text to be a lot smaller than it would be otherwise, which isn't great for reading and scanning. But like any character sheet in any RPG, once you've sat through a single session, you've pretty much memorized where everything is on the sheet, so readability doesn't have to be top priority here. You get a bunch of each archetype with the pre-drawn character portrait, and a few with the portrait area blank so that you can draw your own character in. There's actually so little writing done on these playbook sheets that I think you could probably get away with just ripping one out and laminating it for infinite reuse. Okay, this conspiracy board is pretty special. It's not really something I've seen before, but it's a concept that could definitely be used in any kind of mystery or investigation game. Basically, it's a giant, ultra thick, color, dry erase board that unfolds to 2.5 feet wide by 2 feet tall, and players use color-coded post-it notes. You have to buy the post-it notes yourself, but the notes can represent everything from PCs to NPCs to clues to plot points of interest. And then you can use a dry erase marker to draw lines that connect each of these plot elements together. You don't actually need this particular board to do this. You can use any dry erase board, or really even a large piece of cardboard or paper. But this is sort of the deluxe foldable branded version that makes it really feel like part of the game. Next, there are the dice. They come in this clamshell plastic case. If you buy these dice, don't throw away this clear plastic case. It's actually a reusable case that's meant to store your dice and cup inside. This set is comprised of 5 red and 4 yellow appetite dice and 3 white trouble dice. The 6s on each die have a special logo on them. 6s in this game mean success, so you're always going to want to roll those little logos. The logo on the cup is printed. I almost missed it when I opened it, but the image on the roller cup is completely demented. It depicts a hen serving up her own leg. That's the kind of irreverent humor, by the way, that the comic series is dripping with, and really what you're supposed to bring to the table in this game, if you can stomach it. The dice are decent, not too much to say about them. They're colored in the theme of roasted seasoned poultry, I guess. The print job looks good and durable. There are some pins if you're a collector of these. The first is a flaming chicken. I believe this is Pollo, the fighting rooster from the comic series who plays a major role in one or more of the story arcs. Little rubber backs on the pins there with the Chew logo debossed there into the metal. There's a bucket of Mother Clucker chicken here. There's an FDA badge. For those of you outside of the US not familiar, FDA is the Food and Drug Administration, which regulates food and drug safety in the United States. But in the world of Chew, due to the bird flu, the FDA has become the most powerful federal law enforcement agency in the land. In real life, the FDA is not really all that powerful. But that's it for the physical offerings. Let's dive into the game and see what makes it tick. Again, I can't possibly cover everything that the 2 books contain, but I'll try to give you the highlights here. The most important things you need to know about this universe are 1, the villains and protagonists have food-based powers. 2, the plots you uncover as a player are always going to be international conspiracies, government cover-ups of aliens, diabolical plans by vampires, that sort of thing. And 3, everything is meant to be over the top. The action, the violence, and the humor. Since the game is centered around investigations, there's a whole system developed for it where players can map out their progress on the so-called conspiracy board. I mentioned it a second ago in the unboxing segment of this video, but basically players are meant to use yellow sticky notes for clues, pink notes for crimes, and a clock for ticking down progress. Blue notes are for details, orange notes are for PCs, and green notes are for factions or NPCs. Lines drawn between these notes represent any kind of connection between them, and question marks indicate mysteries needing to be investigated. But this is really just the baseline. I think a table could quickly come up with modifications to this whole system, as well as additions to the shorthand. But I thought this was a brilliant innovation to the investigation RPG because it puts all the plot progress out in front where everyone can see it at all times. And this concept works equally well on a virtual tabletop. As far as the actual rules of the game, this is a forged in the dark RPG, which is to say it's more story first, and every player uses a playbook that has most of their potential abilities and features pretty much pre-printed for them on the sheet. In this game, there are 8 playbooks, as seen here, and they each come with unique features and abilities. Throughout the course of the game, players are going to be typically rolling 1 to 3 d6s with the hope of rolling a 6, which is a full success. They are rolling to resolve actions, gather information, or resist incoming harm or reduce consequences. Anytime they're asked to roll, they will be rolling the number of d6s equal to one of the 4 attributes being tested. Again, if the highest die is a 6, the roll is a success. If the highest is a 4 or 5, then it's a mixed result. They're still accomplishing the thing they tried to do, but there are negative consequences of one sort or another. And if the highest die on a roll is a 1, 2, or 3, then there's just a generally bad outcome. Every roll is set up beforehand with a position and an effect. Position level tells you how risky the situation is, and there are 4 positions ranging from trivial to cakewalk to risky to nuts. Each higher position risks a higher level of consequence, ranging from 1 to 3. Consequences can come as little individual setbacks or injuries, or can come as a consolidated worse fallout. Effect is also described along 4 stages: no effect, limited, standard, and great. These will most commonly work towards ticking down a progress clock, but can really be applied to any situation narratively as well. There's a meta currency called appetite dice. The character starts with 6 of these, and they're meant to represent a character's innate grit and determination to push themselves beyond their limits. You know, like all meta currencies. In this game, you can spend them in a number of different ways. One way is to add a die to your action roll, or that of another party members to increase chances of success. Another use is to increase the potential effect of your roll. You can also spend 1 or more appetite dice to propose a flashback that would create an advantage in the present. And finally, you can spend them to give yourself an unscheduled break, which triggers a non-work scene to shed conditions. Conditions are the main way of tracking damage to your character and can take any form. Incidentally, you can use a break to actually gain back appetite dice. You can also regain all of your appetite dice by surviving until the start of the next investigation. The thing is, if you use up all of your appetite dice, your character hits burnout and is temporarily taken out of play narratively. They're meant to have reached a point of exhaustion somehow. After each burnout, the character permanently loses 1 appetite die slot and then gets all the remaining slots refilled. Once you've burned out 6 times, your character is meant to retire from the game. Another really critical mechanic in this game that will come up constantly is the resistance roll. Anytime a character is facing a consequence of 1, 2, or 3, they can declare that they want to resist. This is a staple in Forged in the Dark games, and it gives the player a lot of storytelling power, albeit in the form of a gamble. The way it works is that first there's a bad roll, where essentially 1, 2, or 3 points of consequence are foisted onto the PC. Then the player declares that they want to resist, and how they want to resist. The GM then chooses one of the 4 attributes that would best fit the resistance. The player then rolls on that attribute. If they have 2 stars in Instinct, for example, and the GM said to roll Instinct, then they would roll 2d6. Now, no matter what they roll here, they will reduce the consequences by 2. Consequences can only be 1, 2, or 3, so in the most severe case of a 3 consequence situation, they'll still suffer 1 consequence after resisting. This resistance roll is really just determining how many appetite dice they will end up spending. You don't want to abuse the resistance roll as a player because you're risking burning through all of your appetite dice and permanently downgrading your dice maximum. And actually there's another meta currency in this game called trouble dice. A player starts with 3 of these dice, and they're meant to be rolled after a failed action roll. Narratively speaking, they're based on your character's custom-made trouble, which can range from anything like debt, family-related problems, personal rivalries, romance, or an addiction. After a failed roll, you can narratively invoke your character's trouble and roll one of your trouble dice. The price is pretty high though. When you make this roll, you will pick up a condition, worsen your position on the roll, and you're also precluded from making a resistance roll on this action. That final trouble die roll determines the outcome of your action. So here's the thing. When John Harper published Blades in the Dark in 2017, it took the indie RPG world by storm, which is to say, it impressed a couple thousand people. Over the years, it has grown and been used in all sorts of games across pretty much every fathomable genre and setting. But if you're watching this video and thinking that position and effect and consequence are still a little too wishy-washy, that there isn't enough explanation of where the narrative components of the game really actually connect with the mechanical and numerical components, then I have some good news and some bad news for you. I'll start with the good news, and that is the fact that this game, Chew, contains more guidance on how to run a Forged in the Dark system than I've ever seen in any other RPG, hands down. It is literally hundreds of pages of guidance, riddled with play examples long and short, and none of it is very difficult reading. It's straightforward, it's clear. The game is laid out and unpacked beyond anything I was ever expecting. But okay, here's the bad news. It's hundreds of pages of guidance. To be fair, a lot of these pages are filled with art, but even if you took away all the art, you'd still have a couple hundred pages of text. Do you really need to read all this stuff to run the game? Certainly you don't need to read any of it if you just want to play the game and you have a decent GM. But as the GM, are you meant to read 460 pages? It depends on your grasp of Forged in the Dark generally. If you get Forged in the Dark's general position, effect, and consequence economy, and you've run it before, then you could probably just get away with learning how the meta currencies work in this game, and then just read the playbooks for the rest. Which is to say, for some folks, this game is really 20 to 30 pages of new rules. But if you're coming in fresh into the hobby, or arguably worse, if you're coming in from D&D 5e, then honestly you have some reading to do. Literally weeks and weeks of reading. So on that note, let me share with you my thoughts on this game. Cons: 850 pages of reading. I don't actually think there's a problem with the page count, not when the pages are as lavishly illustrated and the writing is as clear as it is, but it might be an issue with how it's divided. The two massive tomes could have maybe been 3 different books: a player's guide, GM's guide, and a setting and mission guide. That way a player can pick up an 80 or 100 page book and not feel so overwhelmed. Violence and cannibalism. The amount of actual violence and cannibalism in your game is completely up to you as the GM and as players, but the default setting, as based on the original comic series and on the artwork found in the book, suggests a really gnarly, ultra-violent world. I'm personally fine with all that, but you should definitely consult the taste menu advice on pages 22 and 23 of the main book to learn more about calibrating what people at the table want to play. It's not really advocating for a whole session 0 here, maybe just 10 or 15 minutes of what people really want and don't want to think about during a session. Pros: well-explained rules. Well, like I said, I don't think I've ever seen a game explain its rules more thoroughly than this one. And if you're in the dark about the Forged in the Dark rules paradigm, this game lays it out so clearly that it's practically the gold standard for explaining this kind of gameplay. Wide open setting. I love the playful gonzo anything is possible world of Chew. It's weirdly very heavy and serious when it comes to interpersonal stuff, and very adult in its violence, but it's just so silly and fun with the aliens and vampires and food-based superpowers and hybrid animals. You can tell lots of fun stories in a setting like this. Lavishly illustrated and high-quality physical product. Just as I've never seen an RPG explain Forged in the Dark more thoroughly than this one, I've never seen a game with 850 illustrated pages. Yes, the creators pulled a lot of the art from a comic series that spanned 60 plus issues, but like I mentioned before, it's not like you can just throw random art onto a page and call it a day. You have to place artwork and text very carefully in order to make everything make sense and readable and usable, and they knocked it out of the park with that. Also, the physical books, slipcase, character sheets, and conspiracy board are all of top-notch quality. Fun investigation board. I especially appreciate the innovation of the shared conspiracy board, as it acts as a handy reminder of narrative progress and tracks characters and clues in a way that enables players to tackle more complex stories and investigations. And due to the fact that the notes persist on the board from session to session, it possibly opens the door to West March's style play, where characters can drop in and out from session to session. I think in the end, this conspiracy board concept shows that the creators thought gameplay all the way through from a player's perspective. So there you have it. This game is a feast of an RPG that manages to so thoroughly communicate the Forged in the Dark mode of gameplay that if you've been holding out for years, you pretty much don't have any more excuses. Let me know if you've been able to get Chew to your table and what your thoughts are on Forged in the Dark. I'd love to hear what you have to say down in the comments. Links for everything are down below. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.